Hi, it's Ben Nicholson, the author of Clockwork Basilisk. Today, with my dear friend, Donal Bates, the chair of the architecture program at the University of Melbourne. Don and I have known each other for 45 years, and he is, in my opinion, one of the most astute architectural theoreticians, as well as builders, that I know of. And I've asked him to basically beat me up, to ask why on earth would I be writing a book about 1820s revolvers when I should be in my chair designing buildings. So, Don,
fire away.
fire away.
Well, it's true, you know, I mean, we have known each other for a very long time. I know a lot of your projects. All of them have a certain obsessive quality to them. You know, whether it's looking at Michelangelo and the floor tiles in the Laurentian Library, where it's gathering bread tags and classifying them in some sort of system or other, where Greek helmets and so on and so forth. So on the one hand, I'm not totally surprised, but clearly there's a fascination with firearms and the role of firearms, not just from a history point of view and military history, but also the manufacture, the move from handcrafted object to machine industrial production, all the way to today, where we see a kind of reversal where the Ukrainians are taking industrially produced Russian objects and turning them into new style hacked objects that are doing incredible defense work for the Ukrainians. So your book, Clockwork Basilisk, where is it in that history?
Okay. Well, you know, I consider Clockwork Basilisk to be ultimately a project about design, partly because that's my history. But what I wanted to do was to look at an object from all of the points of view of what design is. So whether it's the patent, or whether it's the manufacturing process, or whether it is the politics. Collier, you know, presented this thing to the top generals of the period, Wellington, Raglan of the Charge of the Light Brigade, all those guys. He knew them by interview. So I'm interested in the grand vision of what it is to make an object. And that nothing is off the table. And so when you make an analysis of any object, be it your fancy $1,000 glass case or whatever it is, you know, all of these things, they're production. Every piece is exactly the same. They're interchangeable parts. Like the hinge breaks, you get another hinge. So Clockwork Basilisk is a fascinating moment, much like the Gutenberg press going from manuscript writing to print writing. It transfers from handmade gun making to machine-made gun making. You could not make a revolver unless, in production, unless you had a machine to make sure that every time you went down around a fifth of the cylinder, you'd be in exactly the same place. So the back end of the weapon is made by hand. The connection and the brains of the gun, I would hardly say brains, but certainly the brawn of the gun, the cylinder axle, the bushing, they are all made by machines because they had to be. And so I'm fascinated by moments when you have interchanging technologies, you know, an upgrade of a technology, what that messy place is. And as you mentioned, we've talked about it before, you know, watching the warfare going on in Ukraine and the tactics used by the two armies, and particularly the machinery used by the two armies, is part of this conversation. What do you do when needs require that you completely throw out of bed one form of technology, and you do it really quickly? I mean, boy, this all happened. You know, no one is waiting for someone else to go over the top with this. It's very competitive. It's very immediate.
Well, it's life or death.
And for firearms, it's life and death. And I will say that this is one aspect of this project that fascinates me, which is where design that requires a zero coefficiency of failure, i.e. you pull the trigger and the bullet has to fly, it's got to fly, is a quintessential design problem. And you know, the buildings around here, that terrible detail of all those bits of wood, you know, cracking. Oh, there it is, up there. All of these bits of wood that sort of slam into each other. It's a terrible solution. It's like, and when I walked in the entrance, all the water is dripping because the person didn't work out the route of the water. It's awful. Now, with weapons, you can't do that. You can try, and they did, but you know, ultimately you can't do it. So there we go.
Look, we've known each other for over 40 years, about 43 years or so. We studied together at Cranbrook Academy of Art. You went to Houston and then to Chicago. I left and went to Europe, to England, to France, and now here I am in Australia. But we've kept in touch a lot, fairly closely over that 40-year period. And I've always been fascinated by your fascination with objects. I remember at Cranbrook you drawing pieces of broccoli, and our professor, Daniel Liebskin, kept telling you not to keep drawing these bloody flowers and such, but you know, in a way it was clear that you understand something by drawing it, and even taking it apart to its constituent parts. How does that happen also within the book? Because it seems to me there's a continuation of that intricate fascination with how things come together.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a certain tragedy about my career, and also it is ultimately reflected in the book. My family had a 5-generation Victorian factory that made agricultural equipment. And it ended when I was 16, 17. And so I'm living this...
Was that because of you?
Probably. No, it was because of the Americans taking over the agricultural industry of those awful John Deere, green tractors and so forth. So I have lived my life, I often think about this, adding the next generation of mechanical objects, and kind of looking at it, dare I say, from the artistic point of view and the reflective point of view, rather than the active point of view. Added to which is a long and burning interest in firearms. As a prepubescent at middle school, I was firing 22 rimfire at school, and then 303s in high school. And so I've had a long and constant relationship with firearms, and now have a collection. It's not huge, but it's certainly probably more than most people have got.
But in your work, I mean, I think one of the things, again, that fascinates me is that you're an incredible draftsman. I mean, the quality of your drawings and your little notebooks, which are unbelievable in the detail and the intricacy. But at the same time, you did a lot with making things, carving pieces out. But then, you know, in one way, you were one of the earliest adopters of computer-generated drawings and assemblies. And I think even now with Clockwork Basilisk, you also have effectively created a 3-dimensional animation of how the various pieces go together. So I think
very complex.
That push to 3-dimensionality as object, as assembly, as bringing together different elements that then have to work. They're not just static like a house. They actually have to keep moving.
Right. What I really appreciate about military technology is that the coefficient of failure is as close to 0 as possible. When you pull that trigger, it has to go back. It's like I look at this book, and you know, if the cover falls off, you just get another book. It's not a problem. But with a firearm, the coefficient of failure is as close to 0, and that fascinates me. And so I'm interested in getting inside to see what is done to make that happen. One of my favorite firearm museums is called the Dug-Up Gun Museum in Cody, Wyoming. And these are Colts, Smith & Wessons, which have been thrown in the ground, sometimes an outhouse, And you see where they failed. Same place every time. But the Smith & Wesson #3 is the catch that holds the barrel and cylinder to the frame. And I like the theory of it. There's a great poem, I forget who wrote it, you probably know it, but it's about a cart that was designed for every part to fall apart at exactly the same moment. Like the wood rotted, the wheels fell off, the leather of the attachments, it all went boom like that. Now, for me, that's design.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. And in the book, I might add, we have a whole question about the Ship of Theseus, the Theseus paradox, whereby the question is asked, if a boat that brought the kids back from slaying the Minotaur is put in the Agora for 400 years, and you keep adding bits to repair it, after 400 years, I think it's Plato who made the comment, or one of those guys, is it real, right? Is it the real boat if you've replaced everything?
Yeah. That material reality with the object, which is more than about its utility, it's also about its manufacture, its repair, its ongoingness, and its operations. Yeah. Fantastic. Looking
Thanks,
forward
Don.
to the book.